stinking Sunday. We'll go with we. You guys are here. Welcome, everybody, to War Stories Sunday with Papa C. Today, listen, I got to be honest with you guys. Today is going to be kind of, we'll see. Actually, we'll see how it goes. I got to run pretty tight on the hour because I got some plans after this. Yeah, you guys, if you follow any of my other stuff, you probably know what kind of plans I'm talking about. But anyway, let's crack this puppy open. Just had a nice cigar a little bit ago. Cleaned up my house. Had a good podcast this morning with John Fitch. Yep, it was pretty good. Hopefully you guys go and check out that episode. Have a pretty cool little announcement to make as well. Yesterday I had my debut on Rule Zero with Rollo Tomasi. Modern Life Dating John and Ryan Stone. I'm very, very, very happy and pleased to announce that that occurred. I do hope that you go to Modern Life Dating on YouTube and go and check that out. Oh, man. So, where do we leave off last week? Last week we left off with me leaving 3-7 pretty much. We went on that mobile op, went back to Bougie Bost for a little bit. I was there for about a week until I had a personal escort come via Osprey, come and pick me up in order to bring me back to Fob Delaram in order to go meet up with my lieutenant-in-chief, my OIC, and my chief, as I had a specified mission specifically for me. Obviously, that's what specified means, specifically for me. And really what it came down to was, I can't tell if that's on my shirt or what here. Oh, it's just a drop of water, no big deal. There's a specific mission that was going on. Up to this point in time, it was rumored that we were going to be going to Sangin, Afghanistan. It was rumored that 3-7 United States Marines, U.S. forces, were going to be taking over for British 40 Commando, who unfortunately were being completely overwhelmed in Sangin. Sangin was a hot spot, very, very high level. It was pretty well known that Sangin was the hot spot in all of Afghanistan in 2010, even a little bit before that. But the British had control over that, so we weren't able to send forces to it. It's why we sent all our forces to Marja. We were also hoping that sending forces to Marja, that was going to take some of the pressure off the Brits in Sangin. However, that was not necessarily the case. It was just Sangin was out of control. Now, the problem with Sangin was obviously the fact that we didn't have any U.S. intel assets there at the time, that at least none that we knew of. And that's something that we'll get into here in a little bit. It was just kind of a cluster. So I flew into Fob Delaram and received the news that the place that I was going to, I was going all by myself, just with my interpreter. I was going to be part of a small contingent of United States Marines that were going to go in liaison with the British Royal Commandos, and it was my job and my duty to go and do some kind of intelligence transfer as best as we could without blurring the lines of security purposes and all that other stuff. It was really just to go get eyes on the battle space, find out what source networks I could operate with, find out the veracity and all that stuff, and start my whole deal, my shindig there of gaining as much information as possible. The day that I flew into Fob Delaram is the day that Pedro 66 was shot down. That was the Air Force paratrooper, Air Force PJ Blackhawk that was shot down, killing all 6 on board. So Sangin was a total hotspot going into it. And as I said, as I flew in and as I landed, my OIC and my chief and my analysts were even like, they were acting as though I was a dead man walking. Their tone was completely somber. They were trying to let me know that it was gonna be hell on earth. And I'll explain a little bit of that in today's episode. So flew in at night, obviously, so that the helicopter didn't get taken out. Probably the safest bet, but I do believe we still received incoming fire. Just flying in the helicopter, got to meet the Brits, got to meet the staff that was there, got to meet Staff Sergeant Justice Bartell, Gunny Barr, Corporal Keene. I forgot the major's name. I still have not remembered it. Redheaded dude. And got to meet the intel group that was there, the British Royal Marine Intel Group, mixed with a bunch of Army guys, British Army. Next morning, woke up to mortar fire. Got the kind of feel of what was going on later that day. Had to go climb the wall, the HESCO barrier, and return fire already on a contingent of Taliban that were trying to RPG and bust a hole in the southern wall with light machine gun fire, sniper fire, and RPG fire, like I said. So this is literally being in Sangin for about 12 hours, and it's already pretty hectic, already pretty crazy. Where do I want to go with this? Because, I mean, really what it comes down to is I showed up there I showed up there like June 21st, I want to say, was around the time frame. June 14th to June 21st-ish. And instantaneously, like I said, I needed to start working on building my relations, building rapport with people, kind of letting people know who and what was going on. Believe it or not, there was another major there too who was the direct liaison to Colonel Paul Kennedy. I forgot his name as well. I remember he was bald though. He plays a kind of important role in what's going to happen as well. Man, I wish I remember his name. Can remember his face though. Can't remember the name. Long story short is I go around and I start introducing myself. People realize, hey, he's the intel guy kind of deal. People know what's going on. Other intel guys are like escorting me around, telling me about the other intel assets that we have, all the things that are going on. They go and they show me this PDSS Zeppelin that we have. It's a balloon. Fucking crazy little piece of machinery. It floats high above the base with this just insane camera on it that could see like a gnat's ass 25 miles away. Fucking crazy. Find out about the fact that they have another human intel collector there, a British human intelligence collector. So I'm trying to find out when I can meet him. He was apparently at another FOB. That's where he was doing some of his other source meetings, so he wasn't going to be back in for another day or two. And I have to get acclimated to this place because this place is literally 132 degrees and it's literally, like I said, 85 to 90% humidity. Absolutely wild. Getting used to the fact that everything in comparison to Bougie and even in comparison to when we're on that mobile op, this is far more kinetic. Things are moving at a way faster pace. There's a lot more shit going on, and no one was really injured in our time frame that we're out doing that mobile op or even out at Bougie, right? But now here I am in the middle of Sangin, and these Brits, they're cruising around in these vehicles that are they're not like our MRAPs or our MATVs. They're like these like buggies. They have some buggies and they have these other ones that are just like roll cages and they're almost completely exposed. However, it has like the AMRAP undercarriage. So when they do get blown up, it's not nearly as bad, but it's a little bit more devastating and they're more prone to getting shot, right? Whereas in the MRAP and the MATV, it's like 3 inches of solid steel. There's no round that's really going to penetrate any of that stuff or more. Nothing's going to really penetrate that. So I meet our doc. There's a Navy doc that has been there for about the last month and a half or so, and he's going out on like almost every single patrol. This dude His name is Nick Maz. I forgot his full last name. But that's from what I remember his like Facebook handle being. It was Nick Maz. Super, super good dude. This guy, literally, I mean, probably the most, out of all of us, probably the most heroic person, because he was literally going on every patrol. He was there to provide to the wounded. And the biggest thing is this, guys. This is what you have to understand. The reason why he was so gung-ho about doing this is because it was not uncommon for people to go out on a patrol and hit an IED. And not just hit one IED, but hit numerous IEDs. And people were coming back, or going out on patrol, I should say, and it wasn't uncommon for people to lose limbs. All right. So this is the new reality that we have to kind of set in with, is that this is the most kinetic location in all of Afghanistan. The Taliban there have the highest caliber of weapons, and they pretty much own the battle space, which is what was so poor about what the British were doing. Is they were turning over battle space, and what was going on is this was allowing the Taliban to put IEDs almost everywhere. And because there's so few roads, and because there's a ton of jungle and all this other stuff, it's very easy to map out what our troop movements were. So it was very easy for the Taliban, because now it's higher population. It's more of a city too as well. So it's multiple high-rise buildings, lots of walls, lots of blind spots and stuff like that. So it was very, very difficult for us to mitigate that. On top of the fact that there was just like one battalion of people there. So I'd say max amount of people that were on that base it was probably about 400 people, I would say, to include the Afghan National Army and all the other stuff, and the Afghan National Police that were there. So 400 people trying to control this whole city, and it was not working out in the Brits' best favor. Now that I'm there for a couple days, getting used to it, got my teeth cut just a little bit by, getting on the wall a few more times, and doing my work, building rapport with the Afghan intelligence assets that were there, the governor, the chief of police that was there, the British Royal Commando, higher ups, their staff, their intelligence collection platform. I'm starting to figure out how to kind of go about and do what I need to do, right? And get a flavor for what's going on. And I realized quickly that I've just been stuck on base this entire time, right? And I have no lay of the land. I have no clue what's going on, and I have zero sources at this point in time. So I'm like, shit. Well, I'm looking at how these people are coming onto the base. The nationals are coming onto the base, and it's like everything is exposed. Everything is open. Like everyone is around. It was just a very poor setup for how we were funneling people in. We couldn't separate them. And it was just like people were like sitting at a bus stop as they came in. So everyone was visible. So I couldn't try to collect sources there because everyone would know what was going on. And I would pretty much give up my identity as well. So I was like, I can't do that. So what do I have to do? I was like, man, I need to go out and I need to patrol here. And the first thing that they do, so I link up with Keen, and I'm like, hey, Keen, he's been there for like 3 or 4 weeks now. He's got some rapport with the actual infantry movements of the British Royal Commandos and stuff. And I'm like, hey, give me the contact, or give me a contact to go speak to so that I can try to get on patrol. He's like, it's going to be pretty hard to do that just because, obviously all this other stuff. And I was like, whatever, don't worry about it. Just, send me in the right direction. I'll do what I need to do. So I think it's like day 3 or day 4. And I actually end up running into Maz. And Maz is like, hey, you want to come on patrol with us? We're going to PB Wishtan, which is just on the other side of the fishbowl. And we're going to go and take one of these trucks. He's like, it'll be a pretty good one. And just kind of like hold on to your seat, because we're going to be fucking cruising, right? So we don't get shot. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's go. So day 4, day 5, I'm out there and I'm cruising around, getting kind of the lay of the land, and I quickly realize just how big this place is and how hard the terrain is as far as being able to even do the job that I'm trying to do, on top of the job that these infantrymen are trying to do as well, these commandos and stuff. But I only operated to the north on this one, on this patrol. So everything was desert and everything was still like clay buildings. So the way, just to give you guys kind of an understanding, to the north of Fob Jackson, everything was desert. And to the west of Fob Jackson, everything was pretty much desert. And everything was desert and city. Right outside of Fob Jackson, to the west, was a small little street. And like, actually, to be honest with you, the west side of Fob Jackson, there was a stream that kind of disconnected us. And then literally right on the other side of the stream, which was like 10 to 15 feet away, the villages started. And we tried to do our best to clear it out. There's like a schoolhouse that was right next to us. And then just to on the street, just to the west, to the north, was the police station and where the Afghan intel guys hung out at. And that was their means to try to get people to come and report to them without being seen. But then just south of that, outside of this deserted school that they had right outside of our base, started the village. And then literally like 500 feet away to the southwest was a mosque and like family dwellings and stuff like that. And then it started the jungle. And it started the green zone. So everything to the south and to the southwest was pretty much all jungle. It's crazy how this whole setup was. Now, the other cool thing I want to mention is this. The middle of our base of Fob Jackson was the Helmand River. It was like a little split off, right? So due east, like directly east, was the Helmand River. But then there was a small section of that stream, and it was like, and what I mean is like a small section, it's like a 25-foot wide stream that was probably about 15 feet deep of pretty fast moving water that cut directly through the center of our fob, which was actually pretty cool, and I'll get to that here in a second. I'll tell you why. And then that cut the base in half, and on the other half of that base was pretty much, I think we had a small Scottish contingent of the British Army. We had, what the hell? I always forget these guys. What our guys are. There was a small Marine contingent over there too of, not HIMARS, Anglico. I never really knew what Anglico did. These guys just kind of did whatever, and I never really talked to them. There's like 3 or 4 of them there. I think they're supposed to direct artillery fire and missile guidance systems and stuff like that, but I never really saw them. I didn't know what the hell they were doing. Then the Afghan National Police and the Afghan National Army stayed on that side over there, and that's where like the district center was. So that's where the governor and the chief of police, they stayed in their own little mansion that was right over there as well. Pretty crazy. So that's where I would go. I would do a lot of my work by going over to that side of the base and working with those guys and doing stuff. And that's where that road was, like I said, and that's how the Nationals were able to come onto the base. But because it was controlled by the ANA and the ANP, it wasn't really guarded that well. It was a pretty janky setup that we had there. Anyway, go out on that patrol with Maz, with the doc, with 2 British Royal Marines. We go to PB Wishtan in order to go and like kind of refill, help them out, take care of some guys that were a little bit like slightly wounded. I think some guys got some like shrapnel or something like that in their arms from getting shot at from like a Dishka, and sniper rifles and stuff. So we went out there just to make sure that they had some basic medical stuff because they were in their own little patrol base. That's what a PB is. Small contingent of people. It's mainly used for like OP, like observational posts, and obviously look out for people planning IEDs and stuff. So we're leaving Fob Jackson, and we're literally like gunning it down this road, right? Like to get there, like moguls and all this other stuff going down in the wadi. We're stepping on the gas as fast as possible. because like I said, up to that point, we've already lost a couple guys from sniper fire, just from kind of like, I don't want to say dilly-dallying around, but like, I'm telling you, there's a different type of Taliban in this spot. These guys will like hide behind walls. They have sniper positions all over the place. It's pretty fucking crazy. So we're gunning it. We're going over fucking big jumps and all this other shit. Trying not to get stuck too, because if we get stuck, we're fucked. We're literally sitting ducks. So it's pretty wild. Get to Wish Ton, come back as quick as possible. It was like a 2-hour patrol maybe. Covered in dust. It's 132 degrees outside, like I said. And then Maz is like, hey, dude, like when we get back, he's like, hey, let's go in the river. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, let's go in the river. It's hot as fuck out. Let's go in the river and clean up. I'm telling you, it was fucking so epic. We had like we had like ropes that cut across the what's it called, the river, right, from bank to bank, stationed at like 25 meters apart, right? So you can literally like jump in off of this bridge, and you could literally float down and hold on, and you could just sit there and hold on for a little while. You can try to like fight against the current and all this other stuff. And then you could like let go, and you could go all the way down again, and you could grab onto another one. And like you could literally go like the whole length of the base, right, of the fob, up until you get towards the end. And like you don't want to go anywhere near that because there's like concertina wire in the water so that people can't get into the base via the water and all this other stuff. So it's pretty fucking safe, but it's crazy. You like never ever in my life did I expect to do something like that, right? Because like being a Marine, like it's very, very rigid. We're not really allowed to have fun. We're so risk adverse as far as like incidentals and all this other stuff that we can't do any of that shit, right? So Nick is like, dude, let's go. Let's like go jump in the water. Like, what do you got to do kind of deal? And it's like, yeah, sure. Absolutely. So midday, that's kind of like what we would all do. Like anywhere from like 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would go and jump in the water when it was super hot. And it was like super refreshing. It was just cool to kind of like, especially being in such a hard environment. It was kind of like, man, it was just so crazy to have that peace of mind in a way. Just being able to kind of float in the water and let things kind of go for a bit. So that's what we did, and that started to become kind of a trend, so to speak. And like I said, during those times, if people didn't have anything to do, that's where we would all kind of congregate and hang out and have fun and chat and all this stuff. It was cool too because obviously, you know, small contingent of 14 Marines on this base with the Brits. We kind of had to like in a way stick together, but then at the same time we also had to like really work with these guys too. I started to get closer with Keen, and I started to get closer with Justice as well. Those kind of became my buddies. Obviously I started doing my reporting, so I'd spend most of my time in the COC doing my reporting, writing my reports, and sending them up as fast as possible. Obviously, I'm talking a lot about enemy troop movement and all that other stuff, what's going on, the rates by which we're being attacked, scuttlebutt that we're hearing about troop movements, obviously ID placements, ID factories, all this other stuff. I'm not really doing too well as far as collecting sources or anything like that, just because it's super hard to get it. So I'm reporting on that as well, and I'm just letting them know all that good stuff. I start to also get pretty close with some of the squads and asking them to take me out, going to like different patrol bases and stuff like that, and going on different obviously different patrols. My first, I think, 1 or 2 patrols were very like small, just going out to like the bazaar and seeing if I could get anyone to talk to me or anything like that. But at the same time too, the Brits aren't really keen on wanting to take me out, mainly because up to that point, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you guys, the Brits were very, very jaded and bitter up to this point. Number one, British Royal Marines are like British Royal Marine Commandos. They're kind of like the Navy SEALs in a way. they're like special operations in a way of the British Marine or British military. So, like I said, the name in of itself is commandos. They're kind of like more of strike forces rather than being like a occupying army or a conventional army. So these dudes are like being run like 24/7, doing like basic infantry patrols and stuff like that, and they've already lost quite a lot of guys. They're a very tight knit unit. Everyone has a nickname. They all work out together. They all eat together. They're all like very, very tightly bonded. They're truly, truly brothers, like a true brotherhood. And the other thing that I noticed with a lot of these guys is they weren't really proficient in being too uncomfortable, because they kind of had a bit of a like, again, I'm being honest with you. There's a bit of like a prima donna attitude. So a lot of these guys really didn't like going out patrolling for too long. And the only reason why they wanted to go out and patrol was to go out and kill bad guys. That was the only reason. It wasn't to go and do like presence patrols in a way. It wasn't to go out and help a counter intel guy collect more sources to drive operations through intel. It was more so of like, let's go out, let's see what kind of bad guys we can find, and then let's kill them, and let's return back to base. Then we'll go and we'll lay out and suntan for a little bit, go and work out, eat some food, go to bed, and do the same thing over again tomorrow. That was the majority of what they were at. And they were kind of like, again, like I said, jaded, because at this point they've been there for like 4 or 5 months now. It's been fucking hell on earth. They're losing a lot of people. And they're just like, fuck this, let's go home kind of deal. It's not to say that they're bad fighters. Okay. So I'm not knocking them whatsoever. It was just the way, like, it's just the way they were at right now. And I'm sure it didn't feel really good to have American troops coming in to take over their position. And I could tell you for a fact that there was a little elephant in the room with a lot of that going on. So them pulling me on to some of the patrols, they were doing a little bit more of like the safer patrols and seeing what we could do. I remember, the first one, that there was going to be quite a bit of suicide vehicle activity parked in the road. Now, the problem was, though, with all this stuff is that, there's rumors about a lot of stuff. So whenever reporting comes in, you have to like verify it through different means. And that's why it's good to have a source network. A source network you can actually verify through multiple channels of source, through source reporting. The problem we're getting right now is we don't have a lot of verified sources. We don't have a lot of sources in general. A lot of it is just kind of like scuttlebutt, like I said, just rumors, and people can just say whatever. So like, for instance, some of the reporting would be like, oh yeah, there's an IED over here, here, and here, and then there's an IED over there, there, and there. Then another one is, oh, they're moving a lot of heroin and smuggling a lot of cash in. Oh, there's 5 Dishkas being moved in via boats through the river. They're going to move in at night. There's going to be a suicide moped over here at this point in time. Oh yeah, this Taliban commander is threatening to kill these ANA or ANP police officers over at this post if they don't defect. They're also threatening the citizens not to go out and vote on the election, because we were obviously trying to bring democracy over there and all this other stuff. So it's like a swath of information. It's like literally like a total propaganda of just trying to keep us on our toes, keep us guessing of what's going on and all this other stuff. So you never know what's going on, but it's a little bit scary up to this point, because they do, Afghans, it was suicide bombings were a little bit more prevalent in Iraq than they were in Afghanistan. And I'll tell you the difference as to why. In Iraq, what was going on is they were moving in a lot of soldiers from, as far as Al-Qaeda was concerned, from like Yemen and Lebanon and all these other places, right? So none of these people, they were like what we like to call like conditioned at these like terrorist camps outside of Iraq. And then they were moved in as foot soldiers into Iraq. And then they would follow through with what their orders were. In Afghanistan, it was completely different, right? The Taliban were mostly, I guess, like Pashtun, and Pashtuns operated like from middle of Afghanistan all the way down to the very north of Pakistan. That's the main tribe, and the Taliban were more consistent with being like Pashtun and tying into that to that tribe. And then the next thing is, most of these guys, and this is a very underestimated factoid about these guys, is that they were really good fighters and they were warriors. It wasn't necessarily a tactic that they liked to use or like to pull. And when they did use it, they were mostly using like old, sickly people that bought into the Taliban perspective and were willing to sacrifice themselves in that way, which is completely different from what we experienced in Iraq. In Iraq, suicide bombers could have been of any age. It was mostly military age males, though, 18 to 25. And that's how they're operating with it. Now, this rumor, like I said, it was a white car. The majority of cars there were white. It was a like Corolla, which is the majority of cars there too. And it was a gutted car that was just meant for a suicide bomb. So we were going out there to see if we can get more reporting on it, see if we could identify anything, and see if there was any actual source. We were trying to trigger source reporting, especially via ICOM chatter and all that stuff. So that was my first patrol. Pretty scary. Going out into the bazaar, it was very, very dense. What we did too, as well, as we went and we checked on 2 ANP posts, the police posts. And then we actually just ended up going back. So we really only moved and walked about 800 meters total, but it took us probably about 3 or 4 hours to do all that stuff, talking to people, seeing what's going on, stopping and working with like the ICOM and seeing what we're listening to, going in, checking in on the ANP guys, seeing what kind of information they were receiving, going and moving, finding out what was going on, seeing if they had you know what I mean? Like it was kind of silliness. So that was my first patrol. Came back and, quickly realized too, in trying to talk to the nationals there, that most people were not willing to talk out in public either. So it's like, okay, cool. What's the next thing that we can do? Well, the next thing that we're going to have to do is not go out in the bazaar and see if we can go and do like knocking on people's door to see if they would have conversations with us. So it's probably like 2 or 3 days later, I run it up to the patrol leader and stuff like that and say, hey, this is my game plan. Could we go and do this? Let's go down in the alleyways and stuff like that instead of going into, obviously, I don't want to go into the jungle right now because there's not a lot of villages or anything like that. So next patrol, like I said, is like 2 or 3 days later. And we go out probably about 10 a.m. Obviously, anytime we go out, guys, I want you to understand, we're carrying full kit, full Camelback full of water, 6 to 8 magazines. I carried 8 magazines. I liked having 8 magazines, especially there in Sangin. I had a grenade strapped to me as well, hand grenade, carrying my M4, carrying my M9, and that was my full kit. On top of if anyone wanted to carry like a 3-day pack or whatever. But I normally didn't carry a 3-day pack because I didn't have any additional things that I needed to carry unless, of course, they came out and were like, hey, could you carry some extra kit? Went out, walked down the alleyways from the school and all this other stuff. Walked through the mosque and then just started heading south into more and more village. Just strictly staying in alleyways and like side roads and stuff. The way that, if you guys are to picture this, everything is like these adobe mud walls, and it's like a maze that you walk through. And the way that their doors are set up, like these guys, everyone lives in the compound. That's the way that these Afghans set up their houses. So it's not like here in the United States where it's like you're walking down the street and then there's a driveway or anything like that. These are like 3 foot, 4 foot long or wide, alleyways that they operated in, because most of them used mopeds and stuff like that to move around. Some of them were large enough where you could like fit cars and stuff in it. And because it's a compound, they had gates, and it was all like not sheet metal, but like I guess in a way sheet metal. It was like a roofing tin that they would use, and then they would just like lock it up with chains and stuff. So in order to go and talk to these guys, what you had to do was like rattle on the door. Rattle on this like what's it called? Yeah, gate kind of thing. And someone would come, and sometimes it would be a woman, and she would just kind of like be like, hey, who is it? And without showing her face or anything like that. And then the interpreter would come and say, hey, it's us. We're here. We just want to have a chat, see how everything's going. And then she'd quickly go and get the male of the household and he'd come out and he would like kind of like open it up just a little bit, and he'd be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they'd obviously we're pretty much like police at this point in time. We're like, "Hey, open up all the way," kind of deal. We want to have a conversation with you. We want to see what's going on behind there. So it was not very inviting, if I could say. If I could tweak it any better, you know, obviously because we're on high alert. We're in the middle of Sangin, Afghanistan. It's 132 degrees outside. We've been on patrol, moving around in these scary ass fucking alleyways where we can't see shit. Bombs could be in the alleyways, and we don't know what's behind these doors, right? So high alert kind of deal. Each door that we walked up to, it was pretty crazy because it was kind of wild to see. Most of these guys had one or two wives, or more, and then obviously the females were all covered in their burqa. Their little boys would run around; they were all like dirty and stuff like that. They'd have cows or cattle or goats living literally like right inside their compound. That was kind of like the pasture for these animals. Hay all over the place, feed all over the place, literally cow shit, goat shit all over the place. You know, a couple mopeds, and then they had like their little house that was in the back, and obviously it was all mud hut and stuff like that, the way that they had that shaped. And then like some small barns that were obviously all mud huts as well. Little chimneys, right? The cool part about these guys is like, man, I'll tell you, I'm talking about it now. They had these little chimeneas, and that's where they would make their bread. And man, holy crap, I loved the naan that they had there. It was so good. Anyway, so that's kind of like the layout, but they would really not let us come in or want us to come in. And then of course I tried to start talking to them and be like, "Hey, you know, how's it going?" I'm I guess like the cover that I would try to use at that point in time was I couldn't say that I was a human resources or whatever, CAG, not Delta, but civil assistance or something like that. I forgot the name of them, but these were the guys that kind of went around and like checked on like the infrastructure, made sure that they had everything. We would give out money to all this other stuff. I wouldn't. That's what CAG would do. So I would try to play like the humanitarian role, not claiming that I was CAG. I have to say that so I don't get in trouble. But you know, I would ask them about the infrastructure, and I'd try to get them talking. And then in that, if I could like start to pull them away from like the main group of people that were all listening, I would then start to ask questions of like, "Hey, are you being approached at night? Are you being approached at all by Taliban? Is there any Taliban presence in the location here? Do you know of any IED placements? Do you know of any IED factories that are around here?" You know, you're trying to have and build rapport with these guys at the same time while trying to gain some kind of information because it's so quick and you have to like get in and out of there. But these guys are so paranoid, and again, most of them are Taliban too, so they're not gonna fucking tell you. But you have to like kind of play. You have to play with the cards that you're dealt, man. To be honest with you, so we're making no strides. I'm making no strides whatsoever, and yeah, it's kind of disheartening. Like, this is my job. People are being hurt. You know, my guys are being hurt. We're getting shot at a lot. We're getting blown up a lot. People are literally losing limbs and losing, you know, getting killed. And here I am, and it's like, this is fucking near damn impossible. Like, what can I do? You know, I'm young. I think so this is 2010. Yeah, I'm 25 years old. I'm a sergeant, on the list right now. I'm in zone for staff sergeant. Staff selections coming up here soon. And I'm just like, fuck, like, I don't feel like I'm doing my job well. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to work with it. So anyway, we get back to base after my second patrol, and I just realized that what I'm doing right now is not nearly as effective, but I want it to be effective. Get back to base, and I hear word that Frank is back from his little stay up north for his source operations. And people are like, "Hey, Frank is here if you want to go talk to him." And here's this hooch kind of deal. I'm like, Frank lives in his own little spot, as his own his own collection kind of spot too. He's just like he should be treated, you know, being kind of a high level operator and all this stuff. He has his own hooch. He's, like I said, he's separated. He kind of is like, in a way, like royalty. And that's kind of how he should be treated too, because he's the one that's getting all the information. So I go and I talk to Frank, introduce myself, and just start having a chat. And I'm just like, dude, I'm kind of disheartened, to be honest with you. Like, I know that I should probably be coming to you, and let me lay this out a little bit better too for you. Frank is nowhere near the person that I'm expecting. I'm expecting someone like, probably my age, about 25 to 29, kind of like high speed, low drag, like kind of how I am in a way, like very muscular and just kind of like hard. And just like, like fuck it kind of deal. Like, what do you got? What do you want? Kind of deal. Frank is not like that whatsoever. He's like 40 years old, super funny, like super chill, super relaxed. He's got such a thick, like, country English accent that I could barely fucking understand him. He's like throwing out all this fucking British slang, like totally fucking with me. He's got this fucking interpreter. He's making fun of his interpreter to me. His interpreter, like, he's like, this fucking guy isn't worth a shit. He's like, fuck. His interpreter's name was Fredo. So he invites me in, and he's like talking to Fredo, and like Fredo's literally like falling asleep and can barely hear. He's like going deaf kind of deal. Scared out of his mind, won't really go on patrol or do anything like this. We sit down and we share some tea, and I think he even offers a little bit of whiskey or scotch, and I think I oblige. First time ever drinking scotch in my life too, I believe. That was a big thing. The Brits loved scotch. That was like their post patrol type of guilty pleasure. We would smoke cigars and drink some scotch, or just drink scotch. Just a finger here or there. And these guys taught me a lot about scotch too. And it was crazy. Scotch, just thinking about it right now, it's so woody and so smoky and just so deep. But for some reason, after being on a hot patrol like that and kind of like being so gritty and gross kind of deal in a way from all that stuff, like drinking some scotch was like the best. It was weird. And especially in comparison now, I'm sure most people probably would never talk about drinking overseas because we're not allowed to, but who cares? Come and cuff me. Like, we're about to fucking, like, literally die. M6. You mean MI6? I don't know if he was. Let's just say that. Okay? Anyway, long story in a way, but to be honest with you, I'm pulling up a lot of these memories right now thinking about this stuff, and fucking this dude was just, he was like I hate to use the term father. I hate to use that so loosely. But he was definitely like a fucking wacky uncle. And he was just such a fucking good dude. He's like, anything you need, dude, seriously, like, don't bother. Don't worry. Like, come over here if I'm around. I'm willing to like kind of mentor you through this stuff because I kind of recognize the shit you're thrown into. Like, I've been there before. So, I established that relationship with him, and I realized quickly that I can trust this guy, because that was the biggest fear too. And that's kind of what I had to come out upright to and be like, yo, like, hey dude, here's where I'm at. This kind of sucks. Can I trust you? Can I trust you? What's your motivations? What are we doing? Are you Brit and I'm American, or are we on the same team here trying to get out of this alive? And he was totally on board with the, hey, we are one team, one fight. Let's get the Taliban. Let's get the bad guys, right? So he just quickly starts telling me some of the stuff that's going on, giving me a lay of the land of the AO, giving me the stuff that maybe the intel analysts don't really know too much about. He's even telling me he's not giving up any source details or anything like that, but he's giving me some of his source reporting as well, as to like the movements of things that are going on. So now, this is the crazy part of being a counter intel guy, for instance, too. Like, you're like the brain. You're like the brain. You're like, I guess, like, I kind of want to consider it like the spider too, right? You're like, you're the spider that is able to draw all the connections to everyone and know what's going on and understand those networks that are going on and know the information before everybody else in a way and see it all transpire. That's the best way I could put it. That's exactly, like, I was quickly, like, understanding and grasping and casting my net and seeing what was going on and how it was all working, figuring out who to target, figuring out what information was valid, what information was not valid, what I could use, what I couldn't use, what I could throw away, what I needed to report on. And I quickly, at that point in time, started going back, because I'll lay out the way that my day started working from there. I realized that the patrols were not working out in my best interest and my best. I'm not saying all my work needed to be done on base, but my best work was going to be done on base, talking to as many people as possible, and then going out and talking to the intel assets that were off base and things like that, right? Getting intel from all these other intel guys as well, right? And making sure that none of them were connected, but the reporting that was coming back was working. So that's how I started really writing my reports. I got fired up. I literally started blasting out like 3 or 4 reports a day, sending those things up. And then the next thing you know, Colonel Kennedy's like flying into the base. And the first thing he does is he comes into the COC. So Colonel Kennedy, again, like I said, Colonel Paul Kennedy, is the commander of Regimental Combat Team. So he's in charge of pretty much all the battalions in the AO at this point in time. Or I think at least quite a bit of assets is really, he's got a lot of ass is what I'm saying. He can fuck some shit up. He can literally dictate the course of how. It's got to be like 3 or 4 battalions at this point in time, and he can dictate how they move and all this other stuff. So he comes flying in. He gets in the COC, obviously attention on deck for that and all that good stuff. And he goes directly over to his major, who just flew in a couple hours before, who is his O, right? His Ops O, who's really like the one that's like pulling the trigger after he finds out what the colonel wants, right? And he's kind of dictating most of the operations. So we now have like the majority of the staff of RCT. Is it RCT 6 or RCT 2? No, I've been saying RCT 2. He was the RCT 2 commander. That's who I was with. RCT 6 took over later. So RCT 2, all their staff comes in at this point in time. They get everything set up, and then the colonel sets up literally like right behind my desk, and I'm the young buck in there for sure. You could tell, right? I'm 25 years old. I'm a sergeant. I'm not like a lot of these guys are like, the sergeant major is probably like easily 45 years old. Colonel Kennedy's like 45 years old. The major, his Ops O, a bit older, probably in his mid 30s, and they've been through this stuff a little bit. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like typing away at my reports and doing all this stuff. And he comes over my shoulder and he's like, "What you got there?" And I was like, "Hey sir, how's it going?" I think I introduced myself by my proper rank and stuff like that at that point in time. And he's like, "All right, so what do you like kind of, what are you working on? What do you got there for me?" And I was like, hell fucking yeah. This dude is like in it, right? Because he sees me working on a DUR. He knows what that is. He knows it's going to come up to him anyway. So he's like, "What do you got? What are we working with?" And I was like, "All right, sir. Well, I'll give you kind of the rundown if you want to hear the skinny." He's like, "Absolutely." He's like, "First off, what's your name?" And I was like, Sergeant Capella. He's like, "No, what's your first name, buddy?" I was like, "Oh, it's Corey." He's like, "All right." He's like, "Corey, where are you from?" I was like, "Oh, I'm from Connecticut." He's like, "No shit. Me too." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Ellington." He's like, "No kidding. I'm from Bloomfield." I was like, "No shit." So to give you guys kind of some perspective, it's literally like 2 or 3 towns over. He grew up in a town like right outside of Bradley Airport. I'm literally like 15, 20 minutes away from Bradley Airport. And he starts talking about it and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah. He's like, "What do your parents do?" And I was like, "Oh, my mom does this and my dad does this. He works at this corporation." He's like, "Oh, no kidding. My mom works at this diner right outside of where your dad works. her name is this. She was like in the town newspaper because she's worked there for like 40 something years. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. I remember my dad telling me about this lady. Right. So it was like, it was super crazy because all of a sudden, like, you know, that web of connection, my dad knew his mom. And here he is. He's a fucking full bird colonel of RCT2. And here I am, a sergeant, part of his kind of deal in a way, like giving him this information. So instantaneously, he's like, all right, man, you're my guy. And I was like, what's that mean? He's like, you will not, well, he can't order me to do this, but he's like, here's the deal, bud. I really liked what you had to say. The style of reporting you gave me was very direct and all this other stuff. He's like, you're my guy. I was like, all right, cool. So pretty much what he was telling me was this. He's like, whatever information you got, come right up to me, give me that information. That's what I need to work with. Then he gives me the caveat. He also says this. He's like, I want you in all the COC meetings. All right. So the COC meetings are all officers. And it's all, you know, I don't want to say it's all majors and above, but it's mostly majors and above. These are guys that have been in the military for 15, 16 years. They've gone to all sorts of different war colleges and all this other stuff. You know, so, I don't know really what they did. I wouldn't say the majority of them have really been boots on the ground, but they're like, this is like the board of directors of like a Fortune 500 company in a way. And all of a sudden this guy's like, I want you in this meeting. You have a voice. That's what he says. You have a voice. I want you speaking at all of these meetings that we have. And if you hear, this is what he says to me. He said, if you hear anything that is not congruent with what you're finding out and understanding on the ground, I want you to interject and I want you to tell people that they're wrong. And I'm like, oh my God, like, fuck, right? Like, this is like coming into the lion's den and like being given permission to just tell people like, you're wrong. Shut the fuck up. You're wrong. So that's the next thing he says. And then the final thing he says to me is this. He says, here's the other thing too. There's going to be a point during these meetings or even in our interactions where I'm going to ask you for recommendations on what we should do. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, I'm telling you, and this is why I remember this guy, okay? The reason why I remember this guy is because he was unconventional in his war fighting wisdom. He understood an asset, right? He understood that I was an asset. He understood what my job was, my capability was, and he understood that I was in the right position at the right time. So it was, and this sounds fucking crazy too. You really shouldn't be telling a sergeant. You should not be telling a sergeant, hey, like you just got increased into a billet that's literally like a major's billet in a way. You shouldn't be doing that. But he saw, I'm not trying to say anything about me personally. Well, fuck it. Maybe I am. I don't know. But he saw me as such an asset where he was like, this dude is in the know for all this stuff. It would be stupid of us. It would be stupid of us to not use him as the asset that he's meant to be used as. So that's kind of where we left off right there. Was he was just like first name basis with me. And he's like, I want you coming up to me whenever you can, you know, obviously very tactfully. But whenever you have information that is necessary to be reported, I want it coming to me first. Then you could do your reporting, and I'll check the reporting afterwards after it goes through the intel cycle and all this other stuff. But I want that knowledge. I want that knowledge, right? There's a difference. So this is something I want you guys to understand for those of you guys that are listening and following. There's a difference between intelligence and information, okay? Information is just raw data that you find out. It could be rumors. It could be real deal stuff, right? That's information. But intelligence goes through a collection cycle, and analysts and all these other people kind of put in their 2 cents, and they put their they attach where there's been other reporting on that, and then they weigh in and they give it a weight as to like what the veracity of it is. So that's intelligence. It's when it goes through the intel cycle. But this colonel realized that it takes time to go through an intel cycle, usually anywhere from like a week. The fastest it can do is probably 3 days. But the longest it could take is up to like 14 days for it to come back and go through. And then you're finding out what the veracity of it is as well. But here we are. We're in the middle of the deadliest place. This guy has a fire under his ass because he's given the opportunity. He's taking over for the Brits, right? He's the man now. Like, Colonel Paul Kennedy is the man. He is in charge of this AO. He's bringing in his assets in order to try to pacify this area that hasn't been conquered for years. It's been giving people so much trouble. And then he sees me, and I'm his direct link to all this information. So he's like, knowledge, information needs to come to me as fast as possible. I will do my best in order to, obviously, this dude's been in the fucking military for 25 years. He's a full bird colonel. He's like, I can do what I need to do in order to filter the information that I need to. So, needless to say, I made a best friend. No, I'm just teasing. But it was pretty fucking epic. And it was great to see too. Like I said, my boy Justice, who was like the guy holding the fort down, at this point in time, saw that kind of whole thing happening as well. And Gunny Barr too as well. I don't think Keen was around because Keen was off doing his own thing, but that's kind of how like the hierarchy started to kind of form. And I wanted you guys to know that last little tidbit because we're going to get into the next aspect of the story. Then this next story, I know I've been promising a lot of stuff. Actually, I hope the last 2 weeks have been pretty eventful. I feel like they've been pretty eventful. But next week, guys, is probably my most, it's probably the best story. It's the thing that made me into who I am today. What's up, dude? How you doing? KG Auto. I appreciate you guys being in the chat too. Love the feedback. Love you guys chatting in there. As usual, please obviously hit the like button. That would be amazing. I'm going to end it here. Like I said, next week, please do come in 5 p.m. I want, honestly, you guys want to be here from the get-go of this story because it's going to fucking take off. It's the wildest thing that's ever happened to me. It's a hell of a story. And, it's going to be really good. Excuse me. With that said, if you guys are not following me on my other forms of social media, please do so. Go to Instagram, go to Twitter. Even if you're not big on those, I'll tell you guys what I'm doing. I'm trying to just bolster my numbers up. And I'll tell you the reason why I'm trying to bolster my numbers up. When it comes to speaking, when it comes to engaging with the public, when it comes to trying to promote myself in any way, shape, or form, social media is a huge, huge, huge factor where people look at it as like a form of social status, so to speak. So the more numbers I can get, the better. Here's the pro for you, though. I am very open to receiving messages and having conversations with you on my Instagram and my Twitter. So DMs are open where you guys can ask me any questions when it comes to, military stuff. But the main thing that I like to do is I like to help guys form themselves into the best version of themselves. So any questions you guys have there, I'd appreciate it. But it requires a follow. The next thing is if you guys are interested at all, please do go over and join thewartribe.com. Become a member there. I don't do Patreon because Patreon's going down the tubes, and I don't feel like I'd be able to best serve you guys. So thewartribe.com is a place where I have a forum where I discuss all these topics that I talk about, and you guys can post in there and ask direct questions and get direct feedback from me as well. So if you're open to doing those kinds of things, that would be amazing. So like, share, subscribe kind of thing here. Go to my Twitter, go to my Instagram, follow at Corey Capella, CoreyCapella, and join the War Tribe if you can. With that said, I will be back here live at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with John Fitch on Wednesday, and then I will be live next Sunday at 9:30. Oh, dude, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate that. KJ Auto picked up my book. Leave a nice review. Actually, you know what? I hate saying that. Leave a review. If you didn't like it, I would love to hear that. If you did like it, awesome. Much appreciated. So those are my schedules. 9:30 on Sunday mornings now, John Fitch and I go live. And then I will be back here next Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard in order to bring you guys one hell of a story. All right. Thanks for being here. Again, see you guys later.